In October of 2008, I was 35 weeks pregnant with my first child, a son, that I later named Nathaniel. And I was in the hospital. I'd been hospitalized for preeclampsia for just 2 days. I was in the hospital shower that morning, and a pain hit me that was indescribable. My teeth clamped down, and I felt like they would implode. I screamed for my husband, and he came in. They got me out of the shower, called for the doctor, and he was worried that the placenta had become detached, so they did an emergency C-section. I woke up in recovery a little while later, but I still couldn't breathe. They kept telling me that it was anxiety, just to calm down, but I knew it was something more. I told the doctor when he came around, "Dr. Sproul, I can't breathe. I think something's wrong." And he did something amazing, something easy, but something super important. He listened to me. He ordered a CT scan stat, and they found an aortic dissection from just above the aortic root all the way down the entire descending aorta. So I look at Dr. Sproul, and my degree was in biology. I was just a girl. And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "So the main artery that comes off of your heart has several layers, and the middle layer of yours has ripped open." And I kind of smiled because that's my personality. And I said, "Is that bad?" And he said, "Yes, Melissa, you were right. Something's really wrong. The helicopter's on its way." And I had not seen my little boy yet. So I asked him, I said, "Well, can I see my son?" And he said, "Absolutely. Let's get him in here." And they brought him in, and I held him, and I kissed him, and I told him I loved him. I said a lot of prayers. And I gave my life over to healthcare professionals who, thank God, were so much more prepared for disaster than I had been. He said the helicopter is on its way. I kissed my little boy goodbye. I waved to my daddy, and they airlifted me to Vidant Medical Center in Greenville. I was pushed into the operating room about 10 hours after I had that C-section, and I had my first open heart surgery that night. I woke up 4 days later in ICU, and I was confused and disoriented and asking for my son. I was afraid. But because of Vidant's family presence guidelines, my family was right there with me. They walked me through every step of the way. My mom held my hand and told me that my son was fine, that he'd already gone home, that he was healthy, that my mother and father-in-law were taking care of him. My husband was there with me. My dad was there with me. And it made all the difference in the world. And the nurses and the doctors were there for them. They became like our extended family. They were wonderful. So 6 weeks later, I got to go home, and it broke my heart that initially I hadn't been able to take the baby home. So my father-in-law drove back to the hospital with my little boy in the car, and they loaded me in, and he put me right beside him, and he said, "Come on, Mama, let's take this baby home." And I held his hand the whole way. And the air was sweeter than it ever been, and the trees were more beautiful. And they tell you, after a near-death experience, that life matters so much more. If you haven't been there, yeah, it does. It really does. So I got to come home, and I got to be a mom. And Nathaniel is 4 years old now, and the absolute light of my life. I got to know the doctors and nurses as moms and dads and brothers and sisters themselves, and that's what they got to know me as. I wasn't just a dissection to them. They said my name. They said Melissa, and I loved that because it's exactly what I needed to hear. In my own head, I'd stopped being Melissa for a second, and they reminded me, hey kid, that's exactly who you are.